Hello everyone, I am Nick Harrison with Rocky River Woodworks, and today we are going to make an end grain cutting board. I'm going to be using some black walnut since I have a decent amount of it. If this is not enough, I do have a bunch of maple that will make some inlays. That way again, it kind of gets the dark and light contrast to the end grain, to the cutting board. So that's what we're doing today. Stick around. All right, so to make the joining process easier, make the material a little bit more easier to work with, I'm going to cut this into a couple shorter lengths instead of just having this big beam to make it easier to go across my joiner. So the next thing we're going to do is to rip down some of these sections into, I'm going to rip them down into 1.5 inch sections. 1 3/4 inch sections, and then I'm going to go back to the joiner, join them down to a final dimension of 1.5 by 1.5. So now that all of our pieces are cut to 1.5 by 1.5, it's time to do the first glue up. So we're going to lay all these out next to each other. They're not all the same lengths, and that's okay. We're just going to align one edge, and then we're going to glue all these together, long grain to long grain. Now that everything's glued up, we're going to let that dry overnight. All right, so this has had time to dry overnight, so now we're going to take the clamps off and get over on the miter saw and square up these edges so they're not uneven. We're wanting to make them square. So now that we've had our sides squared up on our board, I'm going to use this router sled as a flattening jig to flatten the surface of this. It's too wide to run through my planer, so I'm going to have to do it by hand with the router. I have a surfacing bit in here. I've mounted some blocks on here to keep the workpiece from moving, and then I've put my router sled on here. If you don't have a router sled, you are in luck, because I made a video on how to install one, which will be linked up in the corner. If you have a planer wide enough to use it, to accept it, use your planer. You can do that at this stage because we're not to the end grain yet. You're still planing long grain. If you have a drum sander, you can use it. If you have a hand plane and would rather do that, you can do that too, just to clean up the glue squeeze out and make the board completely flat. In my case, I'm going to start with the router. If I get fed up or irritated, I'll switch to something else. So I've gotten one side done, all the way back and forth, sliding down the router sled to flatten it. It's not going to be perfect. There's still some lines where my bit was going. What I would recommend before flipping this over and flattening the other side is to work your way through the grits on sanding this smooth. You want this to be pretty close, if not perfectly flat. So I'm going to get my sander out, sand this down before flipping it over, and then I'm going to flip it over, flatten the other side with the router on the sled, sand it down. All right, so we have both sides flattened and we have both sides sanded. It's pretty slick. You could stop it here, but that would not be a true end grain cutting board. That would be a long grain cutting board. What we're gonna do now, so our boards are running this way, the ones we glued up. We're gonna cut it, okay, they're running this way. We're gonna cut it this way. All right, we're gonna cut it, I have a stop block set up at 1 3/4 inches. You can make this whatever you want. It can be 3 inches, but just keep in mind, whatever this cut is the thickness, pretty much gonna be the final thickness of your board. I'm shooting for 1.5 inches. The reason I have it 1 3/4 inches is because after we cut these, glue them together, we're gonna have to go through the same process of flattening on the router sled and sanding again, so we're gonna lose a little bit of material. So I'm going for 1 3/4 inches. That'll allow me 1/8 of an inch on each side to flatten and sand. So I have a stop block set up to make sure I get a perfect repeatable cut, and then I'm gonna just cut this over and over until I run out, and then we'll glue it up. All right, so now we have all of our pieces cut. You're gonna want to, like, you know, flip them around, mix them up a little bit, just so it's not a consistent grain. I've kind of done that here, and you can see how the grain's going kind of all different directions. That's what I like. If you want it to go all the same way, you can. That's totally up to you. So now that we have all those, we're gonna glue them end grain up. This is the long grain. This is the end grain. We're making an end grain cutting board. We're gonna glue them end grain up. So we're gonna do that now. Now that it's all glued up, clamped up, we're gonna let it dry overnight. All right, so now this glue up has had time to dry overnight. So we're gonna take the clamps off, we're gonna put it on the table, use the router sled to flatten one side. We're gonna take it to the sanding table, sand that side, flip it over, flatten the other side, sand the other side. We're on the home stretch. All right, so we're officially done sanding, and I didn't show it in the video, but sanding takes quite a bit of time. It took me about 45 minutes to go all the way through the grits. I started at 60 and went all the way up to 220. Getting the sides, the edges, the corners, both sides of the board itself. You can run this through a planer. I just don't recommend it with end grain. If you decide to do that, be super careful and only adjust your planer like a 32nd of an inch each pass, because since it is end grain, it will dang near explode if you run it through a planer. But it come out pretty good. There's a few imperfections. I'll make this the bottom side. This will be the top side. Before we put any finish on it, you're going to want to put some sort of high alcohol content, alcohol-based, something on it. This is just going to remove all of the dust that's in the fibers, in the grain of the wood. You don't want to use water for this because that will raise the grain potentially and make it rough, and you'll have to go through the sanding process again. Normally you wet the wood to raise the grain. On this, I don't do it. I haven't done it before, and it's turned out fine. So I'm going to use paint thinner. I normally use mineral spirits for this. I just don't have any right now. But it's just a little bit, and we'll do this. And the reason you want to use something high alcohol content is not only so it doesn't raise the grain, but also so it evaporates and dries fairly quickly. It'll take a little bit more time on the end grain to dry because it's almost like, you know, absorbing into the wood. But just a little bit on there to get to clear up all of the dust that could be on here. All right, so I've let the lacquer thinner, paint thinner dry. I actually let it dry overnight just to let it truly get completely dry. Now I'm going to start applying the butcher's block oil, butcher block conditioner. There's two types of this. There's this that's a little bit yellow and has wax in it, and then there's a clear version you can get. You can get both of these at Lowe's or Home Depot. This is food grade, food safe. That's why I'm using it on this, so that you can actually use this as a butcher's block. I'm going to start with applying one coat everywhere, let that dry, and then after it's pretty much dry, come back through and buff it out. And then if I need to, I'll apply an additional coat. I'll keep going until I'm happy, and you can do the same. If you rather have more of a matte finish, you might only need one coat. If you want it to be more of shiny, a little bit sheen to it, you might apply additional coats. So keep going until you're happy. Basically, the way you apply this, the instructions are on the back, but the way I've always applied it is go pretty liberally, put a lot on there, and then smooth it out evenly. Let it almost dry, then take another clean cloth and just come back through and buff it, kind of wipe it down. So we're going to do that, and we are done with this project. Now that you've gotten your mineral oil, your butcher's block oil applied and buffed out to where you like it, you are officially complete. You're ready to gift it, keep it for yourself, whatever you'd like to do. Hope you found value in this video. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to hit the thumbs up button to like the video. Also, subscribe to my channel for future videos so you don't miss out on anything. You can find all of these projects and more on my website at rockyriverwoodworks.com. Be sure to also follow me on Instagram at rockyriverww. Hope you liked this video. Thanks for watching.